lately I've been kicking around this concept, uh, and it's that what we want is not what we are owed. And I mean this not in the same way that someone might tell you to manage your own expectations. I mean this more in the sense of neutral acceptance, something that is neither negative or positive. When someone says manage your expectations, it feels like they're telling you to brace for the worst, and that the negative outcome is more likely than a positive one. And when someone tells you to hope for the best, it's the reverse. But to understand that what we want does not equate to what we get all the time can also be a form of neutral acceptance. Take, for example, this cup. Of course, I bought it with the intention of it remaining whole and unblemished. And of course, it is something that's always going to inevitably defy my expectations. So during an earthquake, it fell off the shelf and it broke into a lot of different pieces. And being somebody who practices kintsugi, I always assumed that I would fix the things that break. But as I was collecting the little pieces, picking them up from underneath the shelves and finding them scattered across the floor, the little pieces were already crumbling away in my hands. The material that this cup was made from was very porous and very delicate, and the glaze that was covered in the outside of the materials was also quite thin. On top of that, the design of the cup had this very intentional crackling all throughout the glaze. And just from these little bits of context that I knew about the cup, as I'm gathering the broken pieces of it back together, I started to feel this anxiety that maybe I'm not going to be able to put this cup back together. And then I started to manage my expectations. Is the cup going to come together? Is it worth it trying to put it back? Am I wasting resources trying to put something back together, or maybe it's time to just let it go? And I started bracing for the worst outcome. But then I decided to just try. No expectation. No try for the best, prepare for the worst. Just try. Because I missed the cup already. I didn't want to let it go. I wasn't ready to do that. So I made a plan and I mapped it out and I thought, how can I continue to move with this cup, consider its realities, what is true about the material, what is true about the piece, and accept whatever outcome that may be. That, right, this neutral acceptance. I still want to do well, and I want to extend the life of this cup because I'm very fond of it, but I also don't want the end result to be something that makes its original landscape nearly unrecognizable, because part of repairing is honoring the foundation that was already there. But ultimately, all I can do is try, because despite all of these things that I want, and no matter what my intentions may be and what they're rooted in, perfect control over the end result is not something that's owed to me. In the Book of Tea by Okakura Kakuzo, Kakuzo references an anecdote involving Sen no Rikyu, who is an acclaimed tea master, and his son Shoan. In it, he talks about how Rikyu once tasked his son with preparing the footpath which would lead the guests to their tea room. And wanting to do well, Shoan prepares very thoroughly. He sweeps the footpath and he clears away all the debris. Yet even after several attempts, Rikyu is not satisfied with the result. And it's not until the path reaches this point of being pristine that Rikyu tells his son what it is that he's been doing wrong this whole time. This is not the way a garden path should be swept, he tells him. Then he steps into the garden and shakes a tree and lets its leaves fall however they please. At the time this story was taking place, it would have been autumn, and so the autumn foliage would mar the spotless ground, leaving its telltale traces of the season's change. And it would no longer be pristine, but it would be natural. And I can't help but feel sympathetic towards Shoan because I understand his effort, and more than that, I really understand his desire. Kakuzo uses this anecdote to punctuate something that Rikyu was quite famous for, which was his strict adherence to a specific aesthetic of cleanliness. an aesthetic that seeks to preserve the natural, and by doing so is then considered beautiful. But I think that there is something more to this story and even greater nuance to be found in this lesson that Riku sought to impart to his son. And ultimately, it's that what we want is not what we are owed. All Shoan had wanted to do was meet his father's expectations. Yet, in doing so, he forgets to consider anything beyond his own desire. And therefore, he exerts all of his effort into molding the path to suit his needs, making it spotless. But the path exists outside, it is a part of nature. And so, while it may have been in a garden that had been shaped by human minds and tended to by human hands, it was still a wild thing that existed as part of natural order. The path never owed us its spotlessness, because that was something it could never really offer. So even if Shoan had dedicated as much of his waking hours as he could to maintaining it, the path would always be outside, and all that entails would continue to be true the second Shoan looks away. The leaves would fall on the ground, the bugs would skitter across the path, flowers might bloom in the grass. It was a wild thing that existed. And that's the real thing I think that Ryukyu was trying to convey. How to live beside something and understand the truth of that. Not as a master of the landscape, but as a participant of it, as a caretaker. To be able to consider the world and even things as they are influenced by him, but not to be dominated by him. And in that, you can say that, yes, we can claim ownership of any of our various desires. But all that's owed to us is the work and consideration that it takes. I can guide these pieces back together and trust in my own abilities to help determine the overall success of this shape. But the perfection of the end result is not something that is owed to me. Even with doing my best, I accept that the result is something that can and will evolve beyond my expectations. And in a strange way, I find this to be very comforting.